Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name's David Kamay and it is Friday the 3rd of February 2017. Now this is an extension of the video I did the other day which was called Council Tax, Sovereignty, Jurisdiction and the Common Law, and I really do think I actually should have had allegiance in that title, because allegiance is a very important word. You know, no kingdom, you can't have any kingdom without allegiance to the sovereign, otherwise that's it, it's finished, isn't it? It begins to break apart or fall away from the sides. And in our case, of course, in Great Britain, the sovereign is the embodiment of the sovereignty of the people. It's a title. It's not a person. It's not. Well, it is a person because it's a title, but it's a you know, as in a legal fiction. But it's not a living, breathing individual. The living, breathing individual, of course, takes on the role of sovereign. And the sovereignty is the embodiment of the sovereign of our people. Okay? Now, as I said in the video, council tax, sovereignty, jurisdiction and common law, which this video is an extension of, local councils clearly have no allegiance to the sovereign because they now serve two masters. They serve dead entity corporations while paying lip service to the sovereign. You know, they pretend to have this sovereignty, you know, the coat of arms and so on, but they don't in reality have any allegiance because it's all being siphoned off by partnerships, by corporations. Fascism, that's why fascism is so bad, ladies and gentlemen. It is because it is government in cahoots with business. So therefore, it is government that is completely subverted by business, and therefore it is government with no allegiance at all to the sovereign, to the people. It's only got allegiance to itself and those who are making money with it. Anyway, councils, of course, here's a couple of examples of why they don't have allegiance, you know, not just from what I just said. They apply the treason of UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, which is run, of course, by an international NGO. The money of your local council goes to that to pay for this application of UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. So whenever you hear sustainable development, it's all part of the treason plan, the siphoning off of sovereignty, and therefore the destruction of any allegiance, the destruction of the nation, the undermining of the nation. But of course there are numerous examples. That's just one of the biggest because it's all part of an international plan. It should give you an idea of the international corporatization that's going on behind the scenes. Anyway, the other big one, of course, is the deception used to collect council tax via fake courts and fake jurisdiction. Fake, that is, in relation to the true jurisdiction of our nation. Now, in this video, I'm going to take that idea of what I've said about the councils, you know, that they're not having any allegiance to the sovereign, and of course it extends, doesn't it, to all levels of government. And we must remember, as it states in the Bible, which is the book that is at the root of the law and constitution of our nation, the Bible, as it says there, no man can serve two masters. Matthew 6:24, which is of course one of the reasons why you don't have Freemasons working for any level of government, because they serve two masters as well. Okay, so it's important that we must realise no man can serve two masters. And a kingdom can only exist with 100% allegiance. In fact, as I'll say, well, I'll carry on in a second. You'll find out a bit more about allegiance when I continue. Now, the UK is often bandied as a corporation. We often hear it, don't we, in the media? The UK corporation this, the UK is a corporation. Of course, the nation, our nation, is not a corporation. But, you know, the framework of our nation, you know, the common law of our nation, it's not a corporation. The men and women of this nation, the natives of this nation and so on, the body of that is not a corporation. But an internationalist, corporate parasite of all different levels is attached to our nation, as I said yesterday. You've got the column of gold, which is the true jurisdiction of our nation, the true common law jurisdiction, directly linked, you know, with the ultimate sovereign of God through Christ. On it are all these grey parasites, grey corporate parasites. Of course, it's interesting, isn't it? The living God and the dead entity corporation. It'd be interesting for you if you could just get that in your heads. Visualize just think about it. The two, they've got the gold column of sovereignty and jurisdiction directly linked to the ultimate sovereign, and attached to it are all these grey entities, corporate entities, dead entities. Okay. Now, so because the government is also attached to in all these partnerships and making deals with other countries, like Hinkley Point, the power station, etc. Because of that, the allegiance of the government has slipped away into corporate land, and like I just said, or like the Bible said, I should say, no man can serve two masters. Includes, of course, the government can't serve two masters. So like local councils, national government works in partnership or in contracts with outside entities, granting them treasonously some measure of sovereignty. It's not the true sovereignty, of course, it's the rulership that's corporate rulership outside our country, and this is against the British Constitution as given, for example, in the Bill of Rights, 1688, under supremacy. So if you go there, legislation.gov.uk, you can read, and I've also talked about it in the previous video. So this is all against our British Constitution. It's all about destroying our country, ladies and gentlemen. They've gone far down the road, but they haven't gone completely far, as I'll continue to explain. Now, since our government breaks the Constitution, or members of our government break the Constitution in this way, our government has no allegiance to the sovereign. I think I just said that. You either have 100% allegiance or none at all. Allegiance is an all or nothing thing. Again, as I said, no man can serve two masters. And I want you to think about that word allegiance and how absolutely important it is. It's a two-way thing as well, of course. You don't just have some tyrant at the top and everyone's fawning down. That tyrant at the top shouldn't be a tyrant. It should be a servant, someone who serves the people through his absolute integrity. But anyway, let me continue. So no man can serve two masters. Therefore, like our local councils, our true local councils, that is, the true local councils, the ones that haven't made compacts with corporations. So like our local councils, our true local councils, our common law councils, our national government has been vacated. So really what's happening is you've got your council. In it, it appears it's a council, but actually it isn't. It's something else. They have vacated the seats of the true councils. They couldn't sit in them. You can't sit in the seat of a true council and yet have an allegiance that's split between dead entity corporations and your national sovereign. You can't. So by making these agreements, contracts or whatever with corporations, they've jumped out of the seats, which means all these seats are empty in local councils. They might look like they're sitting in government, and this is also the case at government level. You watch the television, you see them all sitting in those seats in the Houses of Parliament and so on. But the true seats have been vacated by the very fact that the government as a whole has siphoned off its allegiance to corporations. No man can serve two masters. So, the government serves corporations only. That's what happens. As soon as you're serving a corporation in government, the allegiance has gone from the sovereign. It's over. You actually, ultimately, your allegiance really is with the corporation. So it's all fake. This whole thing about government and all the levels of the strata of our government are fake because all the seats have been vacated. See if you can imagine it in your head. Imagine them all getting out of those seats and going into seats of grey corporatism, exiting that golden seam of true sovereignty. And they've all got in these seats and they're pretending to be in the true seats, but they're not. because they don't have that allegiance, you see. Now, those who pretend to be in our government are intruders, of course. Corporate intruders. They have no place in our nation. All these people who pretend to be in our government, all of them, because if you're in that system, you're one of those who's with the corporations, you're taking money from them, you're in it, whatever, you see. If you go into government at any level, you are an intruder, because you're working with this corporate system that has no allegiance to our sovereign. Anyway, let's now, so you've got all the government levels. Let's now consider the level of government in our nation that is the sovereign. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that the woman, Elizabeth Windsor, who claims to operate in the capacity of sovereign, is also an intruder, just like all of those others. She serves corporations as evidenced by her signing of the Lisbon Treaty. The woman Elizabeth Windsor, therefore, in my opinion, is an intruder, pretending to be operating in the capacity of sovereign. She has no allegiance to the sovereign being the title that is the embodiment of the sovereignty of the men and women of our nation. And it's interesting also that there's considerable evidence to show that she didn't sign the coronation oath. She didn't sign it. The signature is above the contents, and of course anybody who knows anything about the law, it means it's void. So you could argue on that, if that's true, and the evidence does point to it. You watch the coronation oath, she reaches right over and signs at the top of the paper, and there is of course the image of the signed piece of paper at the top. You could argue therefore we don't have a sovereign. We have a pretender, an intruder. Just from there, so since 1950 or whenever it was, 52, wasn't it? I think we haven't had any sovereign. All the laws from then on, of course, therefore are void. But anyway, not to mention, of course, all the signing of the Lisbon Treaty, we've got this corporate entity on there doing all these signatures that has nothing to do whatsoever with our nation. And it's about time that the people of our nation started to gather together and recognise each other according to the law of this land. Start to operate in a lawful and peaceful way. Taking their energy out of this system so that their allegiance becomes 100% to the sovereign. Now, therefore, okay, so, she has, as I said, she has no allegiance to the sovereign being the embodiment of the sovereignty of the men and women of our nation. Therefore, like local government now has no allegiance to the sovereign, as I've explained, like national government now has no allegiance to the sovereign, and I think it's been a process that's actually been going on for hundreds of years. I think you can cite things in the 1600s that refer to this, probably earlier, but I'm not doing a history lesson. I'm just talking about that fact about allegiance and sovereignty. So therefore, like the local government now has no allegiance to the sovereign, the national government now has no allegiance to the sovereign, so the sovereign also has no allegiance to the sovereign. Or the woman who claims to be the sovereign, Elizabeth Windsor, has no allegiance to the sovereign. It appears that she didn't sign the paper in the right place, and of course the actions speak louder than words. The signing of the Lisbon Treaty, for example. That was all beyond the law, so therefore unlawful, so therefore void. Membership of the EU is, of course, void because of that, and many other reasons. Now, therefore, the positions of government, of lawful government, at all levels in our nation, I am repeating myself, but nevertheless these points are important. Therefore, the positions of lawful government at all levels in our nation, from the sovereign down, are empty. They have been vacated. Imagine it, a load of empty golden seats. That's the truth of it. Of course, you can look at the woman Elizabeth Windsor sitting on the throne, wearing the regalia. But if you look at the reality of it, the real energy of it, it's not true. There's a golden seat that hasn't been approached. Nobody's gone near it. The golden seat of the true sovereign. Similarly for all those in the seats of Parliament. True golden seats are no longer sat in. All the seats of our government, from the true throne to the seats of our true parish councils, are, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, empty. These golden seats of true sovereignty are empty. We are currently, therefore, living under the power, those who consent, and they always say we're governed by consent, contracts. We are currently living, I think Theresa May, wasn't it, who said we are governed by consent, and the Queen herself said, I don't make the law. No, she doesn't make the law. The law's already made. We are governed by consent. How do you consent? Contract. We are currently living under the power of a facsimile, therefore, of the government of our true nation. A facsimile whose sovereign is the corporation. And the head of the corporation, what's a corporation all about? Corporations are about making money, of course, using that money to enslave, imprison, and gain more power, more worldly power. That's what the corporation's about, and ultimately it's internationalist. It's linked to the internationalist banks. We live, therefore, in a sort of unlawful looking glass. Like Alice's looking glass, where things look similar but are inverted and false. We must step out of this looking glass. We must recognise our true government and our true sovereign, the seats of which are empty. We must work lawfully towards filling the seats of our government with men who have true allegiance only to our true sovereign. We must recognise that sovereignty in our nation extends from God through Christ. This is in our nation, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Christian nation. It has a Christian framework. We must recognise that sovereignty in our nation extends from God through Christ, via the sovereign, via the common law, with a common law framework to keep it in shape. It's taken thousands of years to develop this. Or over 1,000, I should say. The question is, of course, who should fill the place of the title of sovereign, of the king? That seat is now empty. In the real world, in the looking glass, of course it's not, but in the real world, it's empty. There it is. Okay, who can fill that seat when we consider all this? Would it be the so-called next in line? Well, in answer to that question, I believe that the seat should be filled only with a man of absolute integrity, a man who is in as close accord with God through Christ as he can be, without, of course, being a priest. We think of King David, don't we? The Bible, who was both the psalmist and the king. I do not therefore believe that such a man needs to be genetically connected to any of the sullied so-called royal bloodlines. For such a man will be selected in a different way. And we also can sort of nudge into the area of being transformed from above, which is what happens when the big change happens here in this world, which I often talk about, the beginning of the aeon, the epiphania, but that's another thing. But I will repeat myself, actually, because I think it's important. I do not therefore believe that such a man who's going to take this position of the sovereign needs to be genetically connected to any of the sullied, because it is sullied, there's no point in calling it a bloodline anymore, royal bloodlines, so-called royal bloodlines, for such a man will be selected in a different way. We're not talking about democratic selection so much, it's a different sort of thing. Now, that may sound a little bit outlandish, but it isn't. We must think about all these various things. Anyway, now, that's quite a statement to make, isn't it? It's quite an important idea to recognise that we really are living in this, through this looking glass. The clues are all around us, pointing us towards this. They're in the literature. They're continually expressed by members of the government at all levels, even by the banks, in the media, in the films. Our position is continually showed to us. And like I said, we've got to see those empty golden seats and recognize of our nation and recognise that they need to be filled. And when they are filled properly, and they will be, when they are filled properly, those all extending right up to the sovereign, when those seats are filled properly, so the great tick, the great corporate tick, the great corporate parasite, the internationalist parasite will fall away. And we'll be in a different era. We're not talking about revolution, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking first about recognising the true structure of our nation and spreading that true recognition to other people, and really waiting and see. And also, by the way, when we recognise that inverted situation we are in and we take ourselves out of it, we can't be touched by it anymore. And when we recognise, like I said yesterday in that other video, the previous one, the true line of gold, and when we recognise it and when we reside in it, we are indeed untouchable. Not as if we're bulletproof, but hopefully you get the drift. You will live a lot more of a relaxed life if you want, because there are many men and women in our nation, aren't there, who want to live a free life, but they're harassed at all levels. But when you begin to see the true structure of things and recognise that we are in this looking glass, I think your confidence grows. I don't think untouchables is a bit of a strong word, because I don't think everybody's totally untouchable, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. We've got to begin to recognise, we've got to sort of see through the veil, see the true government through the veil, see those empty seats, and get our true jurisdiction. Live within the true common law jurisdiction of our nation is the first big step, actually. Strengthening your relationship with God through Christ is also a very important step. And I'm not talking about being involved with any of the churches, of course. As Christ said, the only mediator between man and God is him. No harm in good people of like mind meeting together in congregations or ecclesia, if they're possible at the moment, which I don't think they are, but congregation's fine, ecclesia I'm not so sure about, but that's another thing. Anyway, with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, please do either join the Common Law Nations Alliance, or like the Facebook page, or follow it on Twitter. There will be more. We aim to get more posts and things. There have been a few of them, not as many as we'd like, but we mean to get some more posts up there on the Facebook page and on the Twitter. But do follow that and share the website, share the ideas of the website, Common Law Nations Alliance website. Read it, see what it's about, and share this video as well. And thank you very much for watching. We shall speak to you soon.